How you doing? Andrew Soto here. I am at the old Tennant Church, Presbyterian Church in Manalapan, New Jersey, and just in that direction is the battlefield of the Battle of Monmouth occurred here during the Revolutionary War. So this is one of the oldest churches in all of Monmouth County, New Jersey. We are really a beach community, and I live just 10 minutes from the beach. From there, we've got the Manhattan skyline right there. If you were at Coney Island and you look straight across, that's basically where I live within New Jersey. And this is further. This is probably about 6-7 miles inland from there, maybe 10. All right. But one of the biggest battles of the Revolutionary War occurred just a mile and a half up the road. At least the main battle occurred, and it spilled out all over through here. As you look around back here, we have a lot of old headstones here. Very old cemetery. It was originally founded, I believe, 1700 by the first pastor was John Tennant, big farm owner around here. Named the reason for the road is Tennant Road, right? It's off Tennant Road. So just take a quick look around here. These are all colonial style grave markers through here. So some pretty interesting headstones through here. Some of the dead from the battle are buried here, both sides. The battle was maybe about 1,200 people died altogether in the battle, and equal number are wounded. And the people who were part of this congregation, they witnessed it firsthand. They also actively participated in the care of the combatants who were wounded. A lot of them were, not all of them, but quite a lot were brought here to the church, right? The inside of this church was stained with blood. Some of the seats still are stained from the blood of the battle of that day. So check out this cool headstone here. I love that kind of artwork with the skull and the wings coming off of it, the angel wings, right? It's like totally creepy. Here lies Jennard, the body of I think Cherry, wife of James Robbins, who departed this life in April. One in the day, the year of our Lord. And it's really hard to make out the rest. Plus, the writing, this is like English, but this is like, not modern day English, right? So it's kind of hard for me to pronounce the words properly, but like you get the gist of what I'm saying. Pretty wild, right? So there's a bunch of these around here, different styles. And these headstones are made like from sandstone that's quarried locally. And I'm going to show you one over here, the devastating effects that this weather has on them, right? It's like some of these don't have much longer to go before they could just completely fall apart. Which is one of the reasons why I like coming out here and look at this stuff, because for me it's artwork, right? And I love art, I love museums, paintings, all kinds of music, mostly heavy metal, but this stuff is just it's pretty amazing. And so much history here, right? You think about all the people that were involved in the battle that were brought here, and the locals, right, who were just farmers. And here now they have this major battle occur right outside their door. The church that they'd go to every Sunday for their entire life is now turned into a morgue and a hospital. And these people are like, you know, they're just wives, husbands, farmers. They're not built for war, right? And all of a sudden their life is turned upside down. Must have been very traumatizing for these people. Haven't been in the military 15 years. I was in the field artillery for 3 years, and then I spent the last 12 in the infantry. I was in Iraq and Afghanistan, and during my Iraq deployment, I mean, that was seriously intense. I mean, that place was just completely leveled, right? And like what these people saw, right, it must have like really affected them. They were up here trying to save the lives of not just the revolutionary, the rebels, the Continental Army soldiers, but also there must have been British soldiers here too, right? They were trying to save these people's lives, and the weaponry used back then, the musket, right? The very large caliber bullet coming out of them, right? It's like it's not quite a 50 caliber round, but you know, in today's, just for your civilian, you don't know anything about weaponry, right? The bullets we fire today are much, much smaller, okay? And back in the day when you got shot just in the arm with a 50 caliber round, okay, your arm is probably, if they're not going to have to like take it off, amputate it, you're going to be lamed for the rest of your life in that arm. You're probably not going to be able to use it very well because the bone is shattered. You know, it's not getting put back together. They didn't have the modern day surgical techniques we did, right? So these wounds were horrific that these people dealt with on the day of the battle, post-battle, probably weeks afterwards, right? You know, and they weren't surgeons. They're just everyday people, farmers trying to make a living, but you know, trying to do the right thing too, which is help these poor guys who've been, you know, wounded in battle, whether they're the enemy or whether they were friendly. And you know, a lot of these people were caught in the middle of this, right? There's a lot of, it was like basically a civil war going on here in New Jersey the entire time of the Revolutionary War. A lot of people were pro for the king. You know, they were loyalists. They were not for the revolution, right? So you had about 30% of the people here that were for the king, 30% that were for the colonies, and another 30% really didn't care. They could flip back and forth. And what occurred here during the Revolutionary War was a civil war, okay? Neighbor fighting neighbor, murders, burning of farms, houses, assaults on family members, wives, daughters. You know, it was absolutely brutal, right? I mean, it caused an incredible amount of damage to the surrounding people and the society, right? That probably took generation to get over after the war was even over. So I'm going to go stop this now, then go to part 2, because I see we're getting kind of a little bit long on this one. So this is part 2. I'm at the Tennant, Old Tennant Presbyterian Church here in Manalapan, New Jersey. It is right about a mile away from the mile and a half away from the main battle lines of where the Battle of Monmouth took place, which was a large and pivotal battle during the Revolutionary War. And the fighting spilled over to this area. And the members of this church, the people who lived in the surrounding communities who were just farmers, they ended up you know, becoming the nurses and the people trying to save the lives of the people who had fought in this battle, both the British and colonial soldiers. But out here, we have Tennant Road. Okay, the first reverend of this church was John Tennant, and it's amazing. But this church, over the course of its 300 years. They took really good notes of all the people who lived, members of the parish, and they kept documents. And in 1900, a book was put together based on all of those documents, right out of 1901, I believe, and it's the history of this old church. And it has probably about 10 pages about the Battle of Monmouth and, you know, what happened to the people who were here. And one of the amazing things is, and this is really a big deal in history, was this street out here where you see where you see the entrance over there, right outside of this church, George Washington was coming up this road, and he ran into his forces that were retreating. And what had happened was General Lee, and no, he is not connected to Robert E. Lee, but General Lee, it was his job to guard the rear flank of the army. Because for those of you who haven't been in the military, you have an enemy force envelop you and get into the rear of your line, you're in big trouble. It's probably gonna rout your entire army. It causes, your soldiers to become very fearful and flee from that kind of thing, right? So quickest way to lose a battle is let the enemy get behind you and press into your flank. And so it was his job and his troops' jobs to guard the flank. And as General Lee was heading down this road, he encountered a British force of an unknown size. And what happened was he pulled his troops back instead of like fully engaging, right? So it kind of caused fear and panic in the troops, right? Which is why we never say retreat, right? If you're in the Army or in the Marine Corps, you never scream the word retreat, because people hear that and they start to panic, because you're like, oh shit, we're losing this thing, right? So it's a withdrawal. Tell the troops we're withdrawing, okay, so that we don't have a situation where everybody takes off and runs. So this is what happens. His forces start telling each other, hey, we need to retreat, and panic ensues. They start pulling back up this road, run right into General Washington, and Washington was pissed and grabbed up these soldiers, asked them what's going on. They tell him what's going on, and some point after that, Lee shows up. And this is all occurring literally, the Journal of the Church says 100 feet outside the church, this went down. And they had an all-out throwdown, General Washington and General Lee. And Washington relieved him on the spot, told him he was going to be court-martialed and brought up on charges for cowardice, not following his orders. And that's actually what happened. He was removed from command. And in hindsight, we look back on it now in military terms, he probably did the right thing by not tactically advancing. He didn't have a large enough force to engage the enemy, right? And the enemy was occupying key terrain, right? It was right at a pinching point of a river and a bridge. So had he tried to engage the enemy, his forces probably would have been cut to pieces. But in the fog of battle, as we call it, General Washington certainly didn't see it that way. And General Lee, he destroyed his career. He was court-martialed. He was found guilty. He was stripped of his generalship and shamed. So it's like one of those things. This is what happens in war. You're a commander. You make a decision, and boy, sometimes those decisions, it's not easy being a leader, whether you're, a leader of 12 men or you're in charge of like an entire division. And me having been in the Army, I can tell you, when you're in charge of people, those are their lives that you have in your hands. So, you're making decisions. You better be damn sure that you're making the right call, because you're going to have to live with those consequences. And, he did. But that happened all here at this church, right? And today, military history, it's a big deal of what happened right out here. And, still for the record books, was he right? Was he wrong? Really impossible to tell. So that's part 2. I'm going to stop. We're going to go to part 3. So, war is a terrible thing. People are killed. We as soldiers know that, right? But you expect to die in battle facing the enemy. And it's not what happened right here. This is in memory of Captain Henry Fauntleroy. He was sitting here on a gravestone when an artillery shell, a cannonball, went off course from the main battle and struck him. And it killed him. And this is the headstone he was sitting on right here. So he was just taking a break. having a rest. The battle's going on up the road. And that's the thing, artillery rounds, it happens. Sometimes they go off course, and, it's war. People get killed in the craziest ways. I mean, you don't even believe some of the things I've seen in Iraq, how people lost their lives tragically too. It was just absolutely shameful. But stories for other days. But struck by the cannonball, knocked him back off his back. They dragged him into the church to the third row pew where he died. They did try to save his life, but cannonball at solid steel, and even being hit a mile away, the absolute stopping power of something like that is such that no chance. Even with medical technology of today, you're not going to survive that, right? So that's how he died. Here's a great New Jersey Joshua Huddy, Captain Huddy. Now this guy, he was a born rebel, okay? He was a Quaker, grew up in Salem County, got kicked out of there because he was just always getting in trouble. And Quakers, they're like peaceful, and this guy was not, okay? He liked to drink, party with the ladies, get in bar brawls. Perfect infantry guy, right? Like if you're in the army, you're in the infantry, that's what we like to do. Fight and, drink. So he ended up, was just a notorious guy through these parts. He was like basically Billy Badass, right? And had all the quality principles of leadership, like that you can't teach a person, right? He was charismatic, lucky. He just had that personality, confidence, right? He walked in a room, and he's speaking to you, that this guy means it, right? And he didn't take no shit from nobody, and obviously he was very courageous, had a lot of courage. So what happens to this guy? The Continental Army and George Washington are like, you're perfect. I'm gonna give you a captainship, put you in charge of a couple hundred guys, right? So they put him in charge of the Monmouth County militia, right? Infantry company, and these guys go to work. They're from here. Gonna get under some cover because it's starting to rain. These guys go to work, putting in some work around here, and they are just tearing this place up. It is like bleeding Kansas through here. If you know anything about the Civil War, bleeding Kansas was a terrible time. You had really strong opinions in Kansas about slavery, and boy, it was a real bloody time to be alive, right? A lot of murders, assaults on family members, wives, daughters. Get your house burned down if you didn't have the right philosophy. Like one day the pro-slavery people show up, they burn your house down. The next day the anti-slavery people show up, they accuse you of being pro-slavery, they burn your house down, right? So it's like total insanity, right? But the same thing is going on here in Monmouth County. You have people with very strong opinions, brother versus brother. The first governor of the state of New Jersey is William Franklin, right? Who's William Franklin? Ben Franklin's son is one of his illegitimate sons, but Ben Franklin claimed him as a son, right? You think he's backing Ben Franklin? You think he's with the revolution? No, he's a loyalist. He's with the king, okay? He has to go into hiding, go live in Pennsylvania and run the state from there because there's so many attempts on his life, right? So that's the scene that's going on around in these counties, right? It's just an awful time to live. It's an awful place to be for these people, right? And you have good people on all sides, right? It's like you have loyalists who they thought they were doing the right thing, and you had the revolutionary guys. They thought they were doing the right thing, and in hindsight, it's easy for us to make judgments and say, yeah, of course we should have revolted against the king, right? It's so easy to do that in this day and age, but back then it wasn't so easy, right? You have family ties going back to England. you know, you grew up with picture of the king in your house. You're like indoctrinated to this, right? So, you know, it's very complex social issues of the day going on. And then, of course, you throw in slavery on top of it, right? Which, like, that just adds even more pressure to the pot that's boiling around here. Okay, and I'm going to get back to you on that in the next one, which I think is 3. So, this is part, I believe, 3 or 4. I am here in Manalapan, New Jersey. This is the old Presbyterian church on Tennant Road. Very historic place. A lot of old grave stones. I'm not just here for that. I'm here also for the actual history. You know, if you see my channel, you're probably like, this guy in cemeteries, but you know, it's not the only thing I enjoy, right? It just happens to be like when I'm coming into contact with it right now. When I'm near a museum, I'm in a museum. When I'm walking down the street in Manhattan and I see a spectacular church or a synagogue, I'm in there too, right? And then I'm exploring the history of that place. So, slavery in New Jersey. What, you say? Slavery? What are you talking about? Right? Common misconception with especially Northerners, people who live up here in New Jersey, New York area, is that slavery was in the South. No. Got news for you, it wasn't. There's an incredible amount of slavery around here. This was all farmland. Now it's all mansions, right? Multi-million dollar homes everywhere around here. You get just there, you're looking at 5,000 square feet houses, right? Back in the day, this is all farms, and these farms are being run and managed by slaves. So what happens? Some of them decide that they're going to go fight with the English, right? Because the governor of Virginia puts out a proclamation that any slave, indentured servant, because there's a lot of indentured servitude too. Indentured servitude isn't slavery, right? But it's damn close to it. Okay, you're gonna sign a contract. Could be for 7 years, could be 10 years, whatever, and you are going to work for that person, that tradesman or craftsman, to learn a craft, and you're going to do that job 7 days a week, 24 hours a day for the term of the contract. And you know, it's basically you got handcuffs on you for the entire term of that contract, right? Can't disobey the guy. There are severe penalties for like breaking that contract, all right? You're probably going to jail. Like it's not like something like, okay, so there were a lot of also indentured servants, right? Indentured craftsmen, people from like Ireland, Scotland, right? And of course slavery. And these people are like, you know, to hell with this. I could, you know, instead of dealing with this asshole that I'm working for who's treating me like crap, and I got another 7 years on this contract, if I go fight with the English, I'm gonna be freed when this war is over. So that's what they do, right? And so then you have that going on top of everything else in this area, right? Where you've got the loyalists who don't like the rebels, and then you got the people who are in between, don't really care. One day they're one day they're the next, right? And this is split down family lines, okay? You got brother versus brother, sister versus sister, family versus your neighbor, somebody you knew your whole life, you know, you had great relationship, they were there for you your whole life, helped you out through the hardest times of your life, but now this is kicking off and you've got an enemy next door, right? So that's what's going on around here. It is a absolute boiling cauldron of anger, tension, emotion, arguing about ethical and moral, you know, issues of the day, slavery being one of them. So an incredible amount of slavery going on here. The slave ships used to dock just 12 miles from here in Perth Amboy. They had the slave block there, right? First they'd come in from wherever they're coming, Okay, slave ship come in, they dock in Perth Amboy, they bring them in there, they get them cleaned up, they get them fed after the terrible journey that these people went through, right? Some of them would get sold wholesale right at the block, which is, if I'm going to go there, show you that at some point, right near City Hall, downtown Perth Amboy. They still have the block literally there on the ground that the person would stand on during the sale. And but the majority of them would be put back on a ship, taken right across the bay to Lower Manhattan, Wall Street, Wall and Broad, and same thing. That's where the slave block was, right? Literally, they had a big stone. Person stands on it, you get sold. And I know that's shocking to a lot of people, but that's how it was. New Jersey was the second most. Had the second largest population of slaves of the northern states. And number one, you guessed New York? Yeah, you got it. New York State, right? So for all those people who live in New York in them big fancy buildings, enjoying your lattes, your Apple computer, your Apple phone, always looking down on them southern people. Got a lot to learn, right? Just like we all do. It's absolutely reprehensible what went on, but it was it was something that had been going on since the beginning of mankind, as far as we can go back. There was slavery going on, and they did try to rectify that, the Continental Congress, but there was just so many issues that they had to overcome. It was just pretty much a bridge too far, and it would take another almost 100 years for our nation to overcome, slavery. But we were the first country in the world ever, world history, in 10,000 years of human history. We were the first people to ever say that was enough, right? That it's not okay that people are in bondage, right? That every person, man, woman, or child, no matter what creed you are, what you believe, that you should have sovereignty over your body, right? So, it's an amazing country we live in, and this is the start of all of that right here, okay? And we were just looking at the gravestone of Captain Joshua Huddy, the last episode. Okay, get back some more into kind of why I'm bringing up slavery. Okay, Joshua Huddy, he was buried here. He didn't die. He was the Monmouth County commander for the Continental Army's forces here. And they were just on a tear through this place, right? They're burning down crops, attacking people, stealing. If you're a loyalist for the king, they're getting on you. They're getting that ass, right? They're going to town on you, your people. So what happens? An opposing force springs up against them. And who are these people? Slaves. People who took up the call to arms from the governor of Virginia. And the commander of that force, his name was Titus Cornelius, also known as Colonel Ty. He was 21 when he escaped his bondage, fled down to Virginia when he heard this proclamation, which, just to think about that is an incredible feat, right? Like, you own nothing, you have nothing, and you just go, hey, I'm going to take off and go to Virginia, be a free man, right? Which is, I don't know, 600 miles maybe from here, right? So you're going on foot, you're having to evade the capture of like people trying to bring you back, slave catchers. He makes it all the way down there, and right off the bat, this guy has got the traits of a leader, okay? He is intelligent, charismatic, and he's ready for war, okay? He's a courageous guy, and he's got luck on his side. So what happens is He first is part of what's called the Ethiopian Regiment. Other ex-slaves. See some combat down in the South, and you know, distinguishes himself. Because he distinguishes himself, he gets promoted, pushed up the ladder, gets sent back here. They say, okay, here you go. We're gonna give you your own unit of irregulars. Irregulars are not exactly the military forces, which is exactly what Captain Huddy and his guys were. You know, they're authorized by the Army, but they're, you know, while your side looks at them like they're members of the military, the other side looks at them as guerrillas, partisans, and that has some severe consequences, right? Because when you're a guerrilla, when you're a partisan, the rules of war don't apply to you, especially back then. Nowadays, it's different, but you know, back in these days, you could be executed for being a guerrilla, a bandit, partisan, right? It's a whole different reality. You get captured, they're probably going to torture you, put you to death. So on one side, you have Captain Huddy and his men, and then on the other side, you've got Colonel Ty and his men. And Colonel Ty has one job and one job only, and that is to catch Captain Huddy and bring his men to justice. So he is all over this county, and he's doing exactly what Huddy's doing, right? And his forces. They are tearing this place apart, right? You know, in today's world, both sides, we would say, were committing war crimes, right? Because like they're not taking prisoners. You know, it's eye for an eye justice, straight up vengeance for vengeance, right? You did something, now we're gonna go exact that same thing back on you, right? So that's what's happening. Both of them end up here at the Battle of Monmouth. They do not engage each other, but Colonel Ty, he captures one of the main commanders for New Jersey, for the Continental Army, and you know, once again, this guy, he distinguishes himself in combat, right? He's just got that kind of luck, right? He sees the guy, captures him. Guy's off the battle space. You know, armies need good leaders to be really functional and effective. So, you know, once again, he's getting his flowers from the boss. You know, getting lots of props. They're calling him Colonel. They're recognizing him as a colonel. The British Army did not formally put on paper that he was a colonel, okay? Because he was an irregular force, probably because he was African American. But for 1700s, you be a black man and you got the English officers calling you a colonel and respecting you as a colonel, that tells you one thing. That guy, he must have been some kind of man, right? So Colonel Ty and Captain Huddy, they would meet each other again down the road. Ty and his men would capture Captain Huddy, and just up the road here, big old tavern that Captain Huddy's wife owned, still there today. Really good place to go drink, watch football, decent place to eat. Pretty cool old tavern, right? His house and tavern were over there. It's like probably maybe 2-3 miles up the road, and Colonel Ty and his guys had a shootout with Huddy for over 2 hours. At the end of that shootout, Huddy finally surrendered, as long as they let his wife live and let her go, and she wouldn't be prosecuted. They took him captive, put on a prison ship to send him back to New York. Huddy escapes, jumps off the ship, shot in the hip, and you know, his story goes on. Colonel Ty, during the shootout, he got shot in the wrist, and because there were no antibiotics back in that time, and he didn't want to have it amputated, I'm guessing the wound became infected and he eventually died. But boy, you got to give it off to that guy, Colonel Ty. He must have been one hell of a guy, right? So Huddy, his story continues, battles it out almost to the end of the war. You know, and this is probably towards the end of the war this is occurring. He ends up in Tom's River, captured there, and he's actually put to death, hanged, stretched by the neck, right? And turned into a huge international incident because Ben Franklin was at the peace talks in Paris, France, with the English, and the war was just about over. And the one thing you didn't do in war back then was execute officers, right? The reason for that was, you know, officers keep an army of men disciplined. And when men have been in combat, when they've been in war, you know, you have been dehumanized, right? When you've lost part of your soul, you start doing things that, you know, the normal you wouldn't do, but you've been so desensitized by war, you're capable of doing things, right? These terrible things. These terrible things lead to this, right? So, killing him caused a big problem, and you know, never was really settled. The guy was court-martialed, but his defense was that he was ordered to do this by none other than William Franklin, governor of New Jersey, son of Benjamin Franklin. So he lost his commission, was sent up north and to Canada, and was given 3,000 acres of land. So, you know, he did just all right. But Captain Huddy, he's buried here. Well, we don't know if his body's here. It's probably not here, but his tombstone was erected here just out of the sheer, you know, history of this place and what really occurred here. So I hope you've enjoyed this like quick history talk on New Jersey and the Battle of Monmouth and what was going on here during the Revolution, right? It really is pretty amazing times. Got all these cars of people driving by. They've never been in this place. They don't get to see the amazing art that is on these headstones, right? Which is a shame because they're not going to be here for long. Look at this one. I mean, look at the script, right? It's like the script that these people had was just incredible. And this is in stone. I can't even write in script like this on a paper, okay? And these people are like chiseling in stone, just absolutely perfect, right? So I hope you enjoyed. If you like what I'm doing, check out my other videos. Got a lot more coming, folks. Thanks for watching.